Thank you for joining me. My name is Marc Fitapelli. I'm a New York City-based attorney. I represent traditional and cryptocurrency investors in financial fraud cases nationwide. I'm here today to talk with Coinbase users who may have had cryptocurrency stolen from their wallets. What I'm going to discuss with you is, number one, the immediate first steps you should take if something like this has happened to you. And number two, I'm going to go over the procedural steps that you're required to take under Coinbase's terms of service if you want to pursue a dispute against them. Before I get into that, I just want to put up a brief slide of disclaimers. I want you to understand that this is attorney advertising and I'm not providing you with any legal advice. So with that being said, many of you are watching this video because unfortunately you are the victim of a cybersecurity event and you've had cryptocurrency stolen from your wallet at Coinbase. I want you to understand one very important thing about what may have happened to you. I want you to understand that you could pursue a case against Coinbase even if your credentials were compromised. What I mean by that is you may have been the victim of a phishing scam or a SIM swap or some other malicious hacking event. And you may think that because your credentials were compromised that you can't bring a case against Coinbase. I want you to understand that that simply isn't the case. Coinbase has an independent obligation to its users to safeguard their assets. And as part of that independent obligation, they have to implement reasonable cybersecurity controls. And the case that you would file would allege that Coinbase didn't do that and that they were negligent in implementing those cybersecurity controls. I'm not going to go into detail about the inner workings or the mechanics of what happens at Coinbase, but I just want you to understand that even if you were compromised, you could still bring one of these cases. It's a real common misconception, and unfortunately, it's a misconception that sometimes starts with Coinbase. Sometimes, Coinbase often tells its users that they won't offer them any compensation because the user was compromised. And I want you to understand that these issues are nuanced and they're complex. And before you make a determination that you don't have a case, you should speak to an attorney, and you shouldn't trust trust what you hear from Coinbase, right? So with that being said, what are the immediate first steps a user should take if their account was compromised? So number one, what you should do is you must change all of your passwords, and you should do that as soon as you find out that your account was compromised. I'm not going to go into best practices for passwords, but the password should be complicated, number one, and number two, you should consider using a method for two-factor authentication that is not your cell phone. So you shouldn't use SMS for two-factor authentication. You should use a secure token for two-factor authentication. So that's your first step, is changing your credentials. Your second step is to report what's happened to you to the authorities. And you should go to ic3.gov and you should file an internet crimes report with the FBI. You should also contact your local police department and your local district attorney. And I just want you to understand that if you don't live in a big city and if you live in a small town, your police department and your district attorney probably aren't as well versed in these issues as the FBI or the Secret Service, but it's still worth contacting them. It's worth contacting as many members of law enforcement as are willing to listen to you if something like this has happened to you. So that's your second immediate step. Your third immediate step is a frustrating one. You have to regain access to your Coinbase account. And I'm telling you, it's frustrating because I know from experience in speaking to a lot of users that it's very difficult to regain control of your Coinbase account if you were hacked. And the reason is because Coinbase has a credentialing process that you have to go through. And if you were hacked, sometimes it's simply impossible for you to provide the credentials you need to regain access to your account. But you need to make that attempt, and you have to start that process of regaining access to your Coinbase account. And that's your third immediate step. Your fourth immediate step is you should start gathering evidence. And what evidence should you start gathering? Number one, you should start taking as many screenshots as you can. Number two, you should try to get the IP address of the wrongdoer. You should get the wallet address of where your crypto was sent. If you were a victim of a SIM swapping attack, you should gather any evidence you can from your mobile provider. If you were sent a letter that you were the victim of a SIM swap, you should gather that. And finally, you should check your email box for any emails from Coinbase. And what often happens, I could tell you from experience, is when someone's a victim of a hacking event at Coinbase, the hacker often goes in and changes your email so you're not getting notifications from Coinbase that withdrawals are happening. They'll either do that, or what they could do, if they have access to your email, they'll create an email rule so that all emails from Coinbase are automatically deleted. So what you should do is you should check to see if you should check your garbage to see if any emails from Coinbase were deleted. You should check your junk, and you should also see if any rules were established through your email provider for emails that are coming in from Coinbase. And you need to gather all that evidence together, and that's all very important evidence for your case. The next thing you should do is you should contact an attorney or someone who's well versed in cybersecurity issues. What you don't want to do is you don't want to contact Coinbase because you might say something or do something that will prejudice your case. So for that reason, it's very important to speak to an attorney first before you put anything in writing to Coinbase. And so those are your immediate first steps if something like this has happened to you. After all that is done, what you should do if you want to pursue a dispute against Coinbase is you have to follow the procedures that are established under their terms of service. When you signed up with Coinbase, you agreed to terms of service. Whether or not you read them, you probably didn't, because no one reads terms of service for anything. But regardless of whether or not you read them, you're bound by them. And what the terms of service require you to do is they require you to jump through a few procedural hoops before you can actually sue Coinbase. And the first procedural hoop that you have to do is you have to engage Coinbase in an informal dispute resolution process. And what this involves is Coinbase has an online portal where you submit a dispute to them. You give them your name, your phone number, your address, a description of the dispute, and whatever evidence you may have. And that's a precondition to arbitrating. If you don't do that, your arbitration is subject to dismissal. So that's an important procedural step you have to take before you file an arbitration, right? And under Coinbase's terms of service, you're not allowed to file an arbitration until one of two things happens. Either Coinbase responds to your complaint in writing, or 45 business days has elapsed. And 45 business days is a really long time. So you have to wait for those two things to happen before you can file an arbitration, right? After those two things have happened, and after you've satisfied the condition of engaging Coinbase in that pre-dispute resolution process, then you can file an arbitration. And Coinbase's terms of service require that all arbitrations are filed before an organization called AAA. AAA is the American Arbitration Association. And under Coinbase's terms of service, users are subject to the consumer rules if they file a AAA arbitration. I'm not going to go into the details about AAA's procedure. I can tell you that your arbitration could either be a Zoom arbitration, it could be an in-person arbitration with one arbitrator, or an in-person arbitration with 3 arbitrators. And the reason why you might want to do one over the other is really case specific. If you have a small case, it may make sense for you to do a Zoom arbitration. If you have a large or a complex case, you may want to have an arbitration before more than one arbitrator. But that's what the terms of service require. Unfortunately, it requires arbitration, and you're not allowed to go to court. So those are the steps that are involved. Your immediate first steps, what you should do if this has happened to you. If you have any questions, you can call me at 1-800-767-8040. Or you could visit my website at www.mdf-law.com. You can submit a question to me. Thank you for listening.